Welcome to Washington Policy on the Go. This is David Bose. I am the Communications and Marketing Director for Washington Policy Center. This is the program where every other week outside of the legislative session, every week during the legislative session, we come to you with our center directors and give you the latest news on state policy, updates to our research and analysis of what's happening around the state. Today, we'll be speaking with Elizabeth New, our Health Care and Worker Rights Director, about the latest when it comes to planned family leave, as well as the ballot issue regarding the Long-Term Care Act. I almost said Affordable Care Act. Old habits are dying hard. But first, we're going to speak with Todd Myers, our Vice President for Research and longtime Director of our Environmental Research, about the challenges that he's recently experienced trying to deal with the solar industry. And he uncovered some interesting emails from a public records request that we'll talk about first. In the meantime, if you have a question, because I'm not in the studio today, I do have access to the question. So if you have a question at any point in time, just enter it in the Q&A box that you see at the bottom of your screen on Zoom, and we will try and answer all questions today. So if you have that question, you can pop it in at any time, and we'll have you off around 12:50 or so, or before, to make sure that this is all self-contained within your lunch break. That's our hope anyway. So let's start with Todd Myers. Todd, you've got a really interesting blog up, and it deals with a phenomenon where you're asking questions about an industry that's getting a bunch of money. It looks like things are pretty inefficient based on the preliminary data that you're sharing with the city, and what you've discovered is that they're basically saying, don't talk to this group, don't talk to this guy. Why don't you kind of lay out how you ended up with this email and what it was you were trying to find out before we get into the response of the industry, the solar panel industry, as to what they think of Washington Policy Center.
Yeah, so the trendy thing right now is for Washington State to lavish taxpayer subsidies on solar panels and electric vehicles and a variety of things, claiming that it reduces CO2 emissions. And so there's a lot of money out there flowing from both the state and federal government. In fact, the legislature's own auditing agency called JLARC put out a report, and it had a list of all the various tax subsidies for electric car owners and charging stations and federal subsidies. And it's this very long list that I tweeted out last night just because I thought it was so striking about how many ways we subsidize electric vehicles. And in that report, it actually pointed out that 75% or 70% of electric vehicles in Washington State are purchased in the wealthiest census tracts in the state. So we have this long list of subsidies, the significant majority of which are going to people who live in wealthy neighborhoods. So anytime one of these issues comes up, I take a look at it because I know, one, that it's heavily subsidized, and two, Washington State, Western Washington in particular, is the worst place in the lower 48 for solar panels. So basically outside of Alaska. And so anytime we subsidize solar panels in Western Washington, I know it's probably not going to be very efficient. So the city of Tumwater is installing a solar-powered electric vehicle charging station. So it's the best of both worlds. Subsidies for solar panels, subsidies for electric vehicle charging stations. It's at a park. And the reason they did that is that sometimes it can be very expensive to run electricity to where you need the electric vehicle charging station. And so to avoid that cost of digging up the road or whatever and running the electricity, they say, oh, here's a self-contained unit that's powered by solar panels. And so the city of Tumwater considered it. It cost them about $100,000 in state and local money to install this. And they argued that it could charge vehicles up to 265 miles a day. Now, that 265 miles is based on the manufacturer's promise But of course, Washington State is very bad, so I knew it was going to be less than that. And what's worse, the staff member at the city of Tumwater told the city council that it was 300 miles a day worth of charge, which is even above the up to estimate from the manufacturer itself, which is in the best circumstances, probably Phoenix or something like that. So I called into question these numbers and the utility of this for a variety of reasons. In the Center Square, which is an online newspaper, and they reached out to the city of Tumwater and asked them, like, how do you respond? So their response was rather interesting.
So how did you get the response?
So I did a disclosure request because the city of Tumwater is public. I wanted to see what they were talking about because I knew that I knew that the reporter had talked to them and said, because she said, I'm going to ask them what they say about this. And I said, I'll be very interested to hear what their answer is. So they didn't really say much. So I thought, well, I'll see what they're saying internally. So I did a disclosure request, and that's how I got an email exchange between the sustainability staff at Tumwater and a board member of the Washington Solar Industry Association. And the email I got was very funny. It was to the reporter from the person who was the board member of the Solar Industry Association, saying, I'm happy to talk to you, but before I talk to you, I would warn you against printing anything the Washington Policy Center has or even associating with them at all. And he went on to say that that the industry has lots of red flags about the Washington Policy Center. I bet they do.
I was about to say,
because we have pointed out that solar in Washington State is extremely wasteful and extremely expensive and doesn't deliver the environmental benefits that they claim.
So that they're telling, I mean, it's kind of audacious, I think, for an industry like that to be warning a reporter off. And what I'm wondering is, either the person making that bold attempt, either that person is inexperienced, or it means that they've had success with it in the past. Freudian slip there. They've had success with it in the past and have been able to get media to ignore criticism of their industry based on, hey, if you do this, well, we're going to frown on it. But if you blacklist the Washington Policy Center, well, let's party. We'll have a great time together. That
was the other part that I didn't quote, which is that they said, if you want to talk about what a great job Tumwater is doing in funneling money to us, then he said, quote, let's party. And so I just thought, here is an entire industry who are brazenly telling reporters, do not talk to whistleblowers, do not talk to people who contradict us, and are open about it, right? Can you imagine Boeing? I think you and I talked about this, and your example was, can you imagine Boeing telling media, hey, we'll talk to you as long as you don't talk to any whistleblowers? They would never do that. And yet the solar industry and a lot of these other industries see no problem whatsoever with doing that. And second, they don't have any problem bragging about the fact that government is lining their pocket. They're very brazen about saying government, is doing a great job buying our products and making us rich. And isn't that? And I'm happy to tell you all about that. There's just no shame in it. But the trade-off is that the industry gets the money and politicians and staff get to feel like they're saving the planet. And the only people who aren't at the table are taxpayers who foot the bill for this whole thing.
So they're out in the car just waiting, waiting for the people to eat. They have to leave their credit card for whatever they want, which is insane. But I wanted to take a look at how this works, because did you send the city of Tumwater some information that showed that you're asking them, hey, what's going on with this? Because my numbers are saying something else. The city of Tumwater, were they curious? Because what I'm thinking of is, if they have a staff devoted to these environmental issues, then the staff is informed, hey, you know what, your numbers are not fit here. And if I was on that staff and I was informed that I was way off and I wasn't getting the benefit that I thought I was, and that I had been promised by this other industry, value for dollar wise, I would be upset and wanting to follow up with you and try to figure out what's going on. So I'm curious, on the government side of things, were they following up and actually curious about how they weren't getting the benefit that they thought they might be getting? Or was it more of a kind of silent treatment, circle the wagons, we're doing what we're doing, we're not interested in, in you raining on our virtue parade?
Yeah, I can tell you that I have had many nights where I woke up in the middle of the night very worried that I made a mistake on some calculation or some issue. Like it's a lot of stress because we have to get it right. We don't get the benefit of the doubt. If we make a mistake, media and other folks don't say, well, the policy center's trying, right? They have the best interests, so they made a mistake. We don't get that benefit of the doubt.
Right.
The environmental left gets that benefit of the doubt all the time. They make mistakes all the time, and yet people seem to say, well, they have the best intentions. The environment doesn't really care about intentions, right? If you waste money and screw things up, you've wasted money and screwed things up. So I reached out to the staff person and said, look, I don't, this, you said 300 miles. The company that builds this says up to 265 miles. But we know that 265 miles is the absolute maximum. And that's not going to be true in Tumwater, certainly not in January, right? When we have cloudy, short days.
Yeah.
So what are the real numbers? And I said, here are some ways to calculate this. What am I missing? And the answer was, well, I said 300 because I was talking off the top of my head and I couldn't remember the number. So I just said 300 miles.
Why not?
Well, that you're testifying before the body, before the city council. They're relying on you to make a judgment, and you were badly off. Not only just, off, but like above the maximum the company itself says is possible. But the second thing she said was, as well, this is a pilot project. And so we'll be monitoring to see how it does in the future. But that's also absurd. Nobody spends money of their own money on something that is untested, that they don't know the actual performance of, and then says, well, this is just a pilot project. Yes, I bought this car. I don't know if it's actually going to work or not. It's a pilot car. We'll see what happens, right? You do your research. You figure out, you say, look, this is how I want to spend my money to achieve the things I want to achieve. And so the sort of the waving of the hand and saying, that's just a pilot project, we'll see what happens. $100,000 that could have gone to something that helped the environment. And instead, it's just wasted. Now, I reached out to the company. They also pointed out that in Bellingham, they have installed some of these. So I reached out to Bellingham and said, you've had these for a little while. What has your experience been? And they said, we don't know. We'll reach out to the company and see if they know. So nobody actually seems to be measuring the results, right? That there are press releases that say, isn't this wonderful? Look at this wonderful thing we're doing. But nobody actually seems to be seeing if it's working or worth the money.
And Bellingham would be in a similar position of Tumwater in terms of the maximum benefit is going to be really limited because they're in Western Washington, and they're going to have many months of weather issues that are going to diminish any solar energy production there.
Yes, if you've ever been to Bellingham in December, it is not the best weather.
Oh yes, my sister lives up there, and I was for the first year and a half of college, I was at Western, so very, very familiar with Bellingham. And I worked at the refineries out there too. So it's one of those things where I'm imagining that you're going to do a follow-up on this, on some of the actual, what you learn about what the possibilities are and what they're, when should we expect that follow-up?
So I have asked also, Walla Walla has also installed these. So I've asked them for their results. We'll see if I can get WSDOT has installed, I guess, one or more of these. I'll see if I can get their results. My guess is that nobody's actually tracking. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory has some tools that you can use to estimate the performance of solar panels and other things like that. So I'm going to be looking at that. So there's a variety of ways that we can look at the results of this. I'm trying to get some real world data rather than, estimated data. But needless to say, the estimated and other data show that it is far below the projections that the city of Tumwater was given, the city council there. Now, when I get those numbers, real or from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, I will share them with the City Council of Tumwater. Here's what I will bet happens. They will say, well, okay, that's fine, but we are in a position of leadership to fight on climate change, and this just shows how much we care. And it is an argument, it is something I observed again and again, which is the bigger the waste, the more righteous the cause. Because only somebody who is truly committed to the cause would be willing to waste a lot of money. Anybody can do the rational thing. Rational is easy, right? You do the cost, you do the benefits outweigh the costs. See, easy. Only those who are truly committed to fighting climate change or doing whatever else are willing to waste a lot of money on something to show leadership. And I am willing to bet you that the reaction of the Tumwater City Council will be consistent with what I have seen in so many other cases.
I will not be taking that bet because I like to win when I bet. So, I mean, it does remind me though of, you see a GoFundMe campaign or something for somebody who's been in a car accident or is suffering from a serious illness. And it's like, if they needed $100,000 to get the treatment that they needed or that they expected, and then, if somebody came along and spent, gave them $50,000, but it had to be for shark oil that wasn't actually doing anything, then they could say, well, it just shows that I care more than anybody else because I donated all, we got all this money and we applied it in some way that actually doesn't do anything. When it comes to the environment, people celebrate that, but if it was something else, people would be more prone to see the idiocy of it, I would think, or the lack of effectiveness of it. Quick question here, is there on-site storage of batteries for these solar charging stations? And if not, they're also limited to the real-time output of the panels. You'd need a car plugged in for days to fully charge it. Thoughts?
Yeah, so they do have batteries. So the solar panel can charge the batteries and then the cars can charge from those batteries. So you don't have to be, sitting there the whole time. But even then, if the solar panel is limited in the number of miles that it can charge in a given day, it could take many days, and on the tools that I've seen, it could take many days for the solar panel to charge the batteries enough to charge one car completely. So that's just not a useful way to use taxpayer money. And the other thing is, this isn't a park. If this didn't exist, it's not like cars are going to have no charge if this doesn't exist. The vast majority of people charge at home. There are other places to charge. This is essentially a luxury for people who own electric vehicles. It's like, oh, this is nice. I'll park here and get a little bit of electricity while I'm at the park. But if this went away completely, my guess is that there was not a single person who would ever run out of electricity because this wasn't there. And since that's the case, it means that the impact on climate change is zero, because it is having zero marginal impact on the number of vehicles and the amount of charge that go into vehicles. $100,000 and zero impact on climate change.
Yeah, that's another red flag for the industry pointing out.
Saying things like that gets me red flags.
I don't like that data, frankly, sir. And then also one final observation for me, it was, when I think of when you think 300 miles a day maximum, I was picturing if you had a gas pump and somebody said, look, we're going to put in a gas pump for cars, and it's going to, for a maximum, we'll be able to, at most, we'll have enough gallons of gas in there to get somebody to go 300 miles, for the average car. So one car would fill up, and then the day's over, right? I mean, that station's closed.
Not even fill up, but yes,
yeah. Exactly. In a lot of circumstances, they wouldn't even fill up. So it just picturing it that way shows how ridiculous I think this project is, and what a sad state of affairs it is for environmental stewardship. You know, for a state that claims to be leaders, this is not outside the norm of the things that you've uncovered about our policy. So thank you for that, Todd.
It is sadly consistent.
I know you're headed to Walla Walla today for part of our solutions tour, solutions and social tour. So looking forward to that, and have a safe drive.
Thank you. After, studying things like this, I'm going to need a glass of wine.
There you go, and it's a good spot for it. So thank you.